Breaking news! There's a quiet move that almost flew under the radar, but it tells you exactly where the Detroit Lions' mindset is right now. This team knows the margin is razor thin. It knows the defense has been walking a tightrope for weeks. And more than anything, it knows something had to change before this final stretch slipped away completely. When Eric Howlett was taken off the practice squad after playing virtually every snap against the Rams, the Lions were faced with a clear choice. Protect depth they already knew was stretched thin, or accept reality and pivot. They chose to pivot. That decision opened the door for Jalen Mills and Damontae Kazee, two veteran safeties who aren't coming in as saviors, but with a very clear mission. Bring what this defense has been missing in critical moments: experience, edge, and the ability to make the right play when everything feels like it's about to fall apart. So what does this say about where the Lions are right now? What does this move reveal about the team's mindset heading into the final stretch of the season? That's exactly what we're breaking down today. If you enjoy in-depth analysis and real talk, fan to fan, make sure to leave a like on the video and stick with me. Because in Detroit, nothing comes easy, but nothing is lost. Let's be honest with each other for a second, because that's how Lions fans talk. This defense has effort. No one questions that. But effort alone doesn't stop explosive plays, and it doesn't flip games. The safety position, more than almost any other spot on the field, is where you either survive or get exposed. That's the range position. That's where turnovers are created, where big hits change momentum, and where mistakes get magnified immediately. Right now, the Lions need juice, not perfection. Juice. Jalen Mills, nicknamed the Green Goblin for the way he throws his body around, represents exactly that kind of spark. Is he leading this team to a Super Bowl by himself? Of course not. But could he come in and deliver one hit, one pass breakup, one forced mistake that swings a game? That's the bet being made here. When you look at what the Lions have been rolling out lately, it's not hard to understand why this move feels necessary. Eric Howlett played hard. Nobody is denying that. But sometimes effort meets its ceiling. It felt like watching a guy fighting above his weight class, trying to hang in a situation that demanded more than he could consistently give. Mills and Kazee have been there. They've played meaningful snaps in this league. Mills, in particular, brings a hard-hitting mentality that mirrors what Brian Branch does so well, even if he doesn't have Branch's elite playmaking ceiling. Kazee, on the other hand, profiles more like a ball hawk, closer to what Kerby Joseph gives you when he's right. In a perfect world, you don't need either of them to start, and realistically, they probably won't. The expectation is still that the primary safety pairing is healthier options like Ifeatu Melifonwo's replacements in Thomas Harper and Maddox, and if those guys are back there, you can live with it. But that's the key phrase, if they're back there. This season has shredded the depth chart. Joseph goes down, someone fills in. Branch gets hurt, Rocky Ya-Sin slides into safety. Then Terrion Arnold gets injured, and suddenly Ya-Sin has to move back to corner. Before you know it, you're dipping into players who started the year as your fourth, fifth, even seventh option. That's how thin this has gotten. So when you look at Mills and Kazee, you're not just seeing emergency bodies. You're seeing insurance against a defense that has already shown how fast a leak can turn into a flood. That flood is the most unsettling part. Over the last 5 seasons, the Lions' defensive rankings and points allowed tell a story that's getting harder to ignore. Near the bottom of the league in 2021. Still near the bottom in 2022. Slight improvement in 2023. A real jump in 2024 when injuries eventually piled up. And now, back to the bottom third again. The organization believes in its talent. You don't pay Aiden Hutchinson, Allen McNeil, Kerby Joseph, Alex Anzalone, and DJ Reader if you don't. But belief hasn't consistently translated into results. The defense feels boom or bust. Either it looks dominant or it gives up 40. There's very little in between. That's why this move matters even if it looks small on paper. The Lions don't need Mills or Kazee to be great every week. They need them to matter once or twice. Against the Steelers, against the Vikings, against the Bears. One play in 2 of those games, and the signing is worth it. Mills is 31, not 34, not washed. He's played for Philadelphia, New England, and briefly the Jets. He's seen functional organizations. He understands urgency. For a veteran like that, this might be the last real shot, and players in that situation often play like it. Add in the fact that Christian Mahogany is suddenly a full participant again, and you start to feel the ground shifting just a bit. Mahogany coming back into the mix could stabilize an interior offensive line spot that's been held together by sheer will. He's not perfect, but he can move people, and that matters when your run game has been wildly inconsistent. All of this circles back to one truth. The Lions are still alive, but they're walking a narrow path. The playoffs are there if they win. The division is still mathematically possible, but nothing about this is comfortable, and the defense is the biggest variable. These safety additions are a signal that the front office and coaching staff see the same thing fans see. Something has to give. Something has to change. The question is whether this is enough to tilt even one game back in Detroit's favor. So what do you think these veteran safeties can realistically bring to this defense down the stretch? When you zoom out and connect all these threads, the picture becomes clearer, and it's not a comfortable one, but it is honest. This Lions team is not lacking belief, effort, or even talent. What it's lacking is stability, especially when things start to go sideways. That's why the safety position keeps coming back into the conversation. It's the pressure valve of the defense. When that valve breaks, everything else gets exposed. Corners are asked to do too much. Linebackers are late filling gaps, and quarterbacks get comfortable far too quickly. That's been the pattern, and it's why a move like this, even if it feels small, carries more weight than it looks like on a transaction wire. The Lions' defensive philosophy has been about dictating terms, playing aggressive, trusting guys to win their matchups. When it works, it looks incredible. The problem is that great offensive minds in this league adjust fast. One leak gets found, and suddenly it's not just a leak anymore, it's a flood. That's where veterans like Jalen Mills and Diamante Kazi come into play. Not because they're stars, but because they've seen floods before. They've been in buildings where expectations were high and mistakes were punished immediately. They understand spacing, angles, and when to take risks versus when to live for the next snap. Mills, especially, brings a mentality that this secondary hasn't consistently had when injuries pile up. He plays with an edge. He's not floating in space hoping something comes to him. He's downhill. He's decisive. That alone can clean up mistakes around him. Younger players often hesitate, trying to be perfect. Veterans tend to react. Sometimes that reaction is exactly what flips a drive from a touchdown into a punt, and that's really what this is about. Not dominance, damage control, turning 7 points into 3, turning 1st and 10 into 2nd and long, giving the offense one more possession to do what it's been doing all year, which is score. Kazi adds a different flavor. He's the guy who looks for the ball. He's thinking about baiting quarterbacks, about reading eyes, about jumping routes. In a defense that has struggled to generate turnovers consistently, that matters. Even if he's only on the field in specific packages, that presence changes how offenses think pre-snap. And when you're facing quarterbacks who are comfortable throwing deep, any hesitation you can create is a win. This also speaks to how battered the roster has been. When you're talking about starting players who open the year as safety 3, 5, or even 7, you're not talking about poor planning. You're talking about survival mode. The fact that the Lions are still in this position, still talking about playoff paths and even a division scenario, says a lot about the resilience of the locker room. But resilience alone doesn't close games in December. Execution does. The return of Christian Mahogany quietly fits into this same theme. Stability. He may not be perfect, but he brings physicality and confidence to the interior offensive line. That helps the run game, which in turn helps the defense by controlling tempo and keeping them off the field. Everything is connected. When one part fails, the stress shifts somewhere else. Dan Campbell has said it himself. You alleviate stress in one area, and it moves. The challenge is finding the combination that doesn't collapse under that shift. That's why the next few games feel so heavy. The Lions don't need miracles. They need moments. One hit, one interception, one stop when everyone in the stadium expects the defense to give something up. That's where these signings could pay off. And if they do, even once or twice, it changes the entire conversation around this stretch run. The path is still there. Win, and you're almost certainly in. Win enough, and the division becomes more than just a talking point. But none of it happens if the defense keeps swinging wildly between dominant and disastrous. These moves are about narrowing that swing, tightening the margin, and giving this team a chance to finish what it started. What makes this stretch so fascinating is that it forces everyone to confront an uncomfortable reality about where this team truly is. The Lions are no longer the surprise story. They're no longer the plucky rebuild that just hopes to hang around. Expectations have changed, and with that comes scrutiny. Every personnel move now gets filtered through a different lens. When the team signs a veteran safety in December, it's not viewed as depth anymore, it's viewed as a signal. A signal that the margin for error is gone. This is why the conversation around Jalen Mills and Diamante Kazi can't be isolated to just their names on a roster. It's about what they represent. The Lions are acknowledging that the current defensive formula hasn't been enough on its own. They're acknowledging that injuries have exposed structural weaknesses, especially in the back end, and that relying purely on scheme and effort hasn't consistently worked against high-level offenses. That kind of acknowledgement matters, because it tells you this staff is still searching, still adjusting, even this late in the season. There's also a psychological layer to this that fans shouldn't overlook. When a locker room sees veterans brought in who have played meaningful football elsewhere, it can sharpen focus. Younger players feel the pressure. Roles feel less permanent. Competition increases. that can elevate practice intensity and accountability in a way that words from a coach sometimes can't. Mills and Kazi don't need to say much. Their presence alone sends the message that nothing is guaranteed. At the same time, this move indirectly highlights how thin the line has been between success and frustration all year. Think about how many games have hinged on one or two defensive possessions. Think about how often the offense has done enough to win, only to watch momentum swing the other way because the defense couldn't get off the field. That's where fans feel the tension most sharply. It's not that the Lions are bad. It's that they're inconsistent. And inconsistency in December is deadly. What's interesting is that the blueprint for improvement doesn't require a total overhaul. It requires precision, better communication in the secondary, cleaner disguises, fewer coverage busts, smarter situational football. These are areas where veterans can help even if they're not playing every snap. A single adjustment in alignment, a quick reminder about leverage, a recognition of a formation that's burned the defense before. Those little things rarely show up in box scores, but they show up in wins. The final games will tell us everything we need to know about this group, not just whether they make the playoffs, but whether they're ready to sustain success when adversity hits. The Lions still control much of their destiny. That's the encouraging part. The sobering part is that control doesn't guarantee results. It has to be earned snap by snap, especially on defense. This is where fans come in. The energy, the belief, the pressure, all of it feeds into how this team responds. These are the moments that define seasons and, sometimes, entire eras. So as this unfolds, the real question becomes whether these moves are the subtle adjustments that steady the ship, or simply another reminder of how thin the margin truly is. And this is where everything tightens, because December football doesn't care about excuses, context, or how close you were. It only cares about results. The Lions are now in that phase of the season where every snap feels heavier than the last, where one missed tackle or one miscommunication can undo 3/4 of good work. That's why the safety discussion keeps resurfacing. It's not because fans are fixated on one position. It's because that position has become the pressure point of the entire defense. When the safeties are late, corners are forced to play perfect. When corners have to play perfect, pass rush timing matters even more. When the pass rush doesn't get home, the whole structure bends. That's what Lions fans have been watching happen in real time. Not a lack of effort, not a lack of pride, but a chain reaction. The hope with Jalen Mills and Damontae Kazi is that they shorten that chain, that they're decisive enough, loud enough, experienced enough to stop the bend before it turns into a break. There's also an emotional edge here that shouldn't be underestimated. Veterans who come in at this point in the season know exactly why they're here. They're not here to learn the system for next year. They're here because a team believes it can still win right now. That urgency can be contagious. It can sharpen meetings, tighten walkthroughs, and refocus a defense that has been riding a fine line between confidence and frustration. And while the spotlight is on the defense, everything still connects back to complementary football. If the offense can control pace a little longer, if the run game finds just enough consistency with reinforcements like Christian Mahogany, that buys the defense time. Fewer snaps, fewer chances to break. That's how teams survive injuries late in the year. Not by being perfect, but by being aligned. What's undeniable is that this season is still there for the taking. The path isn't clean. It isn't comfortable, but it's real. Win, and the Lions are in. Win enough, and the narrative shifts again. Lose, and all of these moves get reframed as what-ifs. That's the reality of where this team stands right now. The next few games will reveal whether these adjustments were enough to stabilize the defense, or whether the cracks were simply too deep to patch in December. Either way, we're about to find out exactly who this team is when the margin disappears. At this point, what's left is the uncomfortable waiting that comes before answers arrive. The Lions have made their move, not a flashy one, not a headline grabber, but a deliberate one rooted in awareness. They see what everyone else sees. They know the defense has been living on a knife's edge, and they know that in this league, especially late in the season, edges either sharpen you or cut you. What's important to understand is that these kinds of moves often don't reveal their value immediately. You may not notice Jalen Mills on the stat sheet. You may not see Damontae Kazi's name trending after a game. But you might notice fewer blown coverages. You might notice a receiver hesitate for half a second crossing the middle. You might notice a quarterback check the ball down instead of taking a deep shot. Those are the invisible wins this defense desperately needs. This also puts a spotlight on the coaching staff in a different way. With veterans like this in the room, the margin for mental errors should shrink. Communication has to improve. Alignment has to be cleaner. If it doesn't, then the issue goes beyond personnel and straight into structure and execution. That's why these next games are evaluations not just of players, but of systems. Are the Lions capable of adapting on the fly, or are they locked into tendencies opponents already understand? Fans should also recognize how rare it is for a team this battered to still have a legitimate path forward. Injuries at safety, corner, along the defensive line, and even along the offensive line would have buried many teams weeks ago. The Lions are still standing, and that says something about the foundation that's been built. But foundations don't win games on their own. They just give you a chance, and that's what this is now, a chance. A chance for the defense to stabilize. A chance for veterans to matter in small but critical ways. A chance for the Lions to prove that they're more than a team that builds momentum only to watch it slip away when adversity hits. December and January are about answers, not potential. Everything from here on out will be remembered. Every stop, every breakdown, every adjustment. This stretch will define how this season is talked about years from now. Not the early wins, not the hype, the response. And that's the part that makes this moment so heavy for everyone invested in this team. There's no hiding anymore. The Lions have reached the stage where the season stops being about trajectory and starts being about identity. Who are you when things get tight? Who are you when the defense has already been punched in the mouth once and has to line back up knowing the next series might decide everything? That's why these veteran additions matter beyond XS and OS. They're stress tests. They force clarity. If the communication improves, if the secondary looks calmer, if the defense stops unraveling after one bad drive, then you know this team is capable of adjusting under pressure. If not, then it confirms what the numbers have been hinting at for years, that the Lions can build talent, but sustaining defensive consistency is still the unresolved piece. You can feel how close this group is to flipping the script or reinforcing old doubts. The offense has carried its weight more often than not. Scoring in the mid-30s on the road should be enough in this league. When it isn't, the spotlight gets harsh. That's when